And let there be love here among us. Let there be love in our hearts. May now your peace fill this nation. Cause us, oh Lord, to arise. Give us a fresh understanding, brotherly love, living through. Let there be love shared among us. Let there be love. Well, I want to say welcome to everyone who is on the live this morning. Welcome to everybody who is going to come into the live after it's over. Welcome to you all. Thank you all so much for coming. This morning we are going to be starting with the book of Ruth. Yesterday we completed the book of Judges, and so as we move along on this quest to completely read the Bible for ourselves so that we can know, to acquaint ourselves with the stories and the actual writings of the Bible, rather than being told by somebody that something is in the Bible when we have not verified that it actually is. And even if it is, what consequence does it have for our lives as it is right now, and whether or not the information that's in the Bible that was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago is practical or relevant to our lives today. We are no theologians over here, but with the Bible being the go-to for all our spiritual, social, and moral justifications, I believe that it behooves everybody to know what's in the Bible for themselves, rather than wait to be told by somebody that XYZ is in the Bible when we have not verified it. And with that, I have taken it upon myself to share with you my journey as I read the Bible for myself and for us, so that we all can use the information as we see fit. Now, this morning, we are onto the book of Ruth, after having finished the reading of the book of Judges, which was rather interesting, especially the story of Samson. We saw in the book of Judges where Israel had their first female judge, which was Deborah, and we saw the children of Israel really their stance really took a back seat after the death of Joshua, who had taken over after Moses. And then we saw several other mediocre leaders come through, and nobody was able to to galvanize the children of Israel as well as Moses and Joshua was able to. And so we saw them go into slavery, into bondage, several times they had fought, they got land, gone into bondage, lost at the wars, and had to go back to their God and ask for forgiveness, and they had to slaughter their brothers because the actions of their brothers were causing them to be out of stance with their Lord, and it was just a whole convoluted situation with the children of Israel, never seeming to find peace, no matter how many wars they fought, no matter how many wars they won, no matter how much land they grabbed, no matter what they did. It just seemed like it was never enough for them to be established as a people, peaceful people though they were. It seemed at some point they never seemed to be contented. There was always something. They were always being in bondage to somebody. They were always losing their positions in society. As soon as they had been able to grab a little smither of it, they lost it to somebody else. So it was just this up and down, in and out, emotional torture for them. And so today we are going to continue the reading of the Bible, and we are going to be reading the book of Ruth. Now, if you have your book Bible or your Google Bible, come along with me and let's read it together. The book of Ruth. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, Ephraimites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. Verse 3. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah. Not Orpah, but Orpah. Almost like Oprah, but the P is in front of the R, is behind the R rather than. So Orpah. And the name of the other, Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Verse 5. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them, and the woman was left with her 2 sons and her husband. Let's read that again. And Mahlon and Chilion died. Mahlon and Chilion are the 2 sons, of Elimelech and Naomi. Now it says, structures the English, their language. So in other words, it says, and this woman, Naomi, was left alone after her husband and her 2 sons had died. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to your mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as he have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that he may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. Verse 10. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters. Why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have any husband. If I should say, I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would he tarry for them till they were grown? Would he stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. So here, Naomi was with her husband Elimelech and her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Now her husband died, and also her 2 sons. So now she is left with her daughters-in-law, the 2 of them, Orpah and Ruth. And she wants to return to her people. And her daughters-in-law wants to go with her. And she's saying to them, well, there's no point in you all coming with me. Go ahead, go back to your parents. And I pray, God, that you all will find love and peace and maybe find you another husband. But I am too old to find another husband, and I am too old to even bear another son. Why do you all want to stay with me and ruin your lives when I am an old woman? I can't bear children anymore. And even if I could, what were you going to do? You're going to hang around with me until that son gets old enough to be married, for you to marry to that son? I mean, go ahead. But they insisted that they were staying with their mother-in-law. Verse 14. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. So Orpah kissed Ruth and apparently left to go back to her people, and but Ruth wouldn't leave. Ruth wouldn't leave Naomi's side. Verse 16. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God be my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass Now, I'm sure we will read later, or we may not, about why the significance of the barley season. But I guess it was getting close to the harvest. Not sure the significance of that pertaining to the story, but we will continue the reading. I want to say thanks to everybody who has come into the live. If you are just coming, I want to say thank you. And if you are a returning traveler, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Now, for those of you who are new into the channel and have not yet hit that subscribe button, now is a great time to do so. Let's move on to chapter 2. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech. Now this is her husband. So this is her in-law. And his name was Boaz. So Boaz was related to Elimelech, which is Elimelech was Naomi's husband. Let's continue with chapter 2, verse 2. And Ruth the Moabite said unto Naomi, Let me now go to the field, and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging to Boaz. Her hap, was that her plan? Yes, her plan was to light on a part of Okay, so something went wrong with the live. Something went wrong with the live. I had to change devices, but since the live is continuing, we are going to continue. But there was a little lapse right there. So we will continue once we get this music sound under control. Okay, so let us continue the reading of the book of Ruth. We are currently on chapter 2. Chapter 2 and verse 13. Then she said, "Let me find favor in thy sight, O Lord, for that thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid. Though I be not like unto one of thine handmaidens." And Boaz said unto her, "At mealtime come thou hither, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel into the vinegar." Now this is Moab speaking to Ruth. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was surprised, and left. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. And let her also some of their handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them, that she may glean them, and rebuke her not." So here is Boaz. Boaz is a rich man. He's the person who owns all these vineyards, and all these bonds people belong to him. And here is Ruth. Ruth is a stranger. Ruth is a Moabite. But she was married to Naomi's son, and she came back with Naomi after Naomi's son, that's her husband, died. Remember, it was her and Orpah who were Ruth's daughters-in-law. And after both their husbands died, they came, and Ruth's husband, Abimelech, died. Ruth came back with Naomi, but Orpah went back to be with her family. And here, Moab is related to Naomi's dead husband, Elimelech, and he is very rich. He has vineyards and fields, just like we read about Malchijah in that story we read on his foundation earlier. So here he is telling his bond servant and the men that he is in charge not to rebuke Ruth, not to treat her with indifference, to let her eat like everybody else, to let her labor in the fields like everybody else, and not to treat her as though she was a stranger. Verse 17. Verse 17 of chapter 2. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out that she had gleaned. And it was about an ephah of barley. Okay, that's how much she had reaped in the field that day. And she took it up and went into the city. And her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. So her mother-in-law gave her what she had left. And her mother-in-law said unto her, "Where hast thou gleaned today? And where wroughtest thou? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee." And she shewed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, "The man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, The man is near to kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. And Ruth the Moabite said, He said unto me also, Thou shalt keep fast by my young men, until they have ended all my harvest. And Naomi said unto Ruth her daughter-in-law, It is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, that they meet thee not in any other field. Verse 23, and this is the last verse of chapter 2. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz, to glean unto the end of barley harvest, and of wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. Chapter 3. Then Naomi her mother-in-law said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? With whose maiden thou wast? That's a conjugation for to be. So it's were. Let's start reading verse 3 again, chapter 3 again. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens you were? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself therefore, and anoint thyself, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the floor, but make not thyself known unto the man, until he shall have done eating and drinking. So here Naomi is kind of setting up Ruth. And she's telling Ruth, Boaz is going to come into this place tonight. Why don't you take a shower, get dressed, go hide back there, and don't let him know you are there until he's finished eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. Hey, okay. So here is Ruth. I think Naomi is trying to get Ruth to be with Boaz. So here she's telling Ruth, when Boaz has come in after he has eaten, hide thyself, don't let him see you. But hide yourself. And when he has eaten and drunken and he's laid down, just get out of hiding and touch his feet. Take the sheet off his feet. And after that, he will tell you what to do. I get Boaz probably going to be drunk, and he's probably going to go in onto her without knowing who she is because he's drunk. And she said unto her, All that thou sayest unto me, I will do. And she went down unto the floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law had said. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly, and uncovered his feet, and laid down. And it came to pass at midnight, that the man was afraid, and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, your handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. Verse 12. And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman. Howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Verse 13. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning. And she rose up before one could know another. And he said, Let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. Also he said, Bring the veil that thou hast upon thee. That means bring the veil that you have on you, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her. And she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, Who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, These 6 measures of barley he gave me. For he said to me, Go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. Verse 18, and this is the last verse of chapter 3. Then said she, Sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall, for the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. Now that is the end of Ruth chapter 3. Okay, there we see Naomi sending Ruth in unto Boaz. But it doesn't seem like anything sexual happened between them. You know, the Bible didn't specifically say. So we are going to assume that all she did was lay there and he gave her the barley when she was leaving. Let's just say that's what happened. Let's move on to chapter 4. And actually, chapter 4 is the last chapter in the book of Ruth. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, this is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. So here they are asking Naomi to sell a parcel of land that belonged to her husband. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, Buy it before the inhabitants, and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. Then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi? Thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabite, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the manner. Verse 7. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. Okay. So they took off their shoe for the next person to hold the shoe as a promise. That's what it sounds like here to me. If you all know differently, let me know. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon. So Ruth's husband was the one named Mahlon. And Chilion was the husband of Orpah, almost like Oprah. Moreover, Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witness this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah. Y'all remember the story of Rachel and Leah? Remember their father Laban was Rebekah's brother? And she had sent Jacob after Jacob had robbed his brother Esau of his birthright, and Esau was hell-bent on getting revenge. Rebekah sent Jacob to her brother Laban, who lived far away. And when Jacob got there, he fell in love with Rachel, who was Laban's younger daughter. And Laban told him he had to work for 7 years before he got Rachel to marry. And then after the 7 years were passed, he wanted Rachel to marry. Laban said, no, you cannot marry Rachel because Leah is here, and the younger daughter cannot be married before the older daughter. Therefore, you have to marry Leah first. And Leah wasn't having a good time getting somebody to propose to her, because Leah had what we call today a cast eye, meaning her eyes were crossed. And so she wasn't having any luck finding a husband. So Jacob worked for his uncle Laban another 7 years before he was given Rachel. So he ended up marrying both Rachel and Leah. And they, along with their two handmaids, bore him the children that were called the children of Israel. So verse 10 of chapter 4. Moreover, Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come unto thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily of Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let thy house be like the house of Perez. Okay, you all remember the name Perez? Remember, Perez was one of those children, one of the twins that Tamar had for Judah. And I'm sure you all remember that story of Tamar and Judah. Let's read that again. Verse 12. And let thy house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. I kind of knew that was going to happen, but I didn't want to jinx it. So Boaz took Ruth. And she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it on her bosom, and became nurse unto it. So Naomi sort of feels so connected to this child, like it's her grandchild, because she has taken Ruth as her daughter, basically, because her sons and her husband have died, and Orpha has gone back to her family, and now it's just her and Ruth. And now she has sort of set up Ruth to be kind to Boaz, and now Boaz has taken the bait, and he has married Ruth because he says he wants the generation, so to speak, to continue, because he wants the legacy of Naomi's husband to continue, because Naomi's husband Elimelech, he owned a piece of land that I believe they wanted to give to the brethren, because that was the practice in those days. But then he said, no, we have to, if you want to buy the land, Naomi has to give the final word about it, because she is the one remaining. And also don't forget that Ruth is here as well, and Ruth was the wife of Mahlon. So they both have something to say about this land. And eventually he says, well, I will take charge, because they were my kinsmen. They were my people, because remember, Boaz and Elimelech are related. So he married to Ruth so that he could continue the legacy of Ruth's dead husband, who is related to him, Boaz. So now they have a son together. That's Boaz and Ruth. They have a son together, and Naomi is so happy. She is now the nurse for the baby. I mean, she's grandma, she's nanny, she's a babysitter, all in one. Verse 17. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. They call his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Oh, okay. All right. So that means that Naomi is David's grandmother. Makes sense, right? So Naomi gave, this is the child. They called him Obed. Remember, Ruth gave birth to the child, and Boaz is the dad. And this same Obed, they say, is the father of Jesse, who is the father of David. So Obed is David's grandfather. Obed is David's, let's get it right now. Obed is David's grandfather. And Ruth, therefore, would be David's great-grandmother. Let's read on to verse 18. If I get that wrong, guys, and you hear it and you think it's not correct, just let me know. Verse 18. Now, these are the generations of Pharez. Don't forget, Pharez is Judah's son that he had with Tamar. Now, these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Aminadab, and Aminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. Okay, so there they just gave you a rundown of the generations. So these are the generations of Judah, because Pharez was Judah's son. Okay. So David was in the line of Tamar as well, because Tamar was Pharez's mom, and David came down the line of Pharez. All right. Okay, guys. So here we have read the story of Ruth, with Naomi. I am going to wait. Let me help you all understand. Wrong. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry about that. That was an error. Now we are going to listen to the summary of the book of Ruth. Now, we know that the book of Ruth is very short. It's only four chapters actually, but in those 4 chapters is one story is compact in that chapter, that you don't have to worry about not understanding it, because it is as plain as day what's going on here. We are going to listen to this summary of the book of Ruth as we have just read it. So guys, if you have not yet read the book of Ruth, you may go ahead and read the book of Ruth for yourself. It's only 4 chapters, very easy to comprehend. Now let's listen to the summary of the book of Ruth.
It's a brilliant work of theological art, and it invites us to reflect on the question of how God is involved in the day-to-day joys and hardships of our lives. There are 3 main characters in the book: Naomi, the widow; Ruth the Moabite and Boaz the Israelite farmer. And their story is told in 4 chapters that are beautifully designed. Let's just dive in and see how this all unfolds. Chapter 1 opens with this line, "In the days when the judges ruled." And it reminds us of the very dark and difficult days from the book of Judges. And here we meet an Israelite family in Bethlehem, struggling to survive through a famine. And so in search of food, they move on to the land of Moab, Israel's ancient enemy. And there the father of the family dies, and the sons marry 2 Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. And then the sons, they die too. And so they leave only Naomi and these new daughters-in-law. And so Naomi, she has no reason to stay anymore. And so she tells her new daughters-in-law that she's moving back home. And Naomi, she knows that the life of an unmarried foreign widow in Israel is going to be very hard. And so she compels the women to stay behind. Orpah agrees, but Ruth does not. She shows remarkable loyalty to Naomi, and she says, "Wherever you go, I'm going to go. Your people will become my people, and your God will become my God." And so the 2 of them return to Israel together. And the chapter concludes with Naomi changing her name to Mara, which means bitter in Hebrew, and she laments her tragic fate. Chapter 2 begins with Naomi and Ruth discussing where they're going to find food. And it just so happens to be the beginning of the barley harvest. And so Ruth goes out to look for food, and it just so happens that she ends up picking grain in the field of a man named Boaz, who just so happens to be Naomi's relative. We're told that Boaz is a man of noble character, and he notices Ruth. And so after finding out more about her story, he shows remarkable generosity to her. He makes these special provisions so that the immigrant Ruth can gather grain in his field. And in doing so, Boaz is actually obeying an explicit command of the Torah to show generosity to the immigrant and the poor. Boaz is so impressed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi. He prays for her that God will reward her for her boldness. So Ruth comes home that day, and Naomi finds out that she met Boaz, and she is thrilled. She says Boaz is their family redeemer. Now, this family redeemer thing, this was a cultural practice in Israel where if a man in the family died and he left behind a wife or children or land, it was the family redeemer's responsibility to marry that widow, to take up the land and protect that family. So Naomi, she begins to hope perhaps there might still be a future for her family. Chapter 3 begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan to get Boaz to notice their situation. So Ruth is going to stop wearing clothes of a grieving widow, and she's going to show signs that she's available to be married. And so Ruth goes to meet Boaz on the farm that night. And as she approaches, Boaz wakes up and he's totally startled. And Ruth makes her intentions very clear. She asks if Boaz will redeem Naomi's family and marry her. Boaz is once again amazed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and her family, and he calls Ruth a woman of noble character. It's the same term used to describe the woman of Proverbs 31. So Boaz tells Ruth to wait until the next day, and he will redeem both Ruth and Naomi legally before the town elders. And so the chapter ends with Ruth returning to Naomi, and they marvel together at all of these recent events. In chapter 4, it all comes together. It turns out, at the last minute, Boaz discovers there is a family member who's closer to Naomi than he is, and he's actually eligible before him to redeem the family. But at the last second, this family member finds out that he's going to have to marry Ruth, the Moabite, and so he declines. But Boaz, remember, he knows Ruth's true character, and so he acquires the family property of Naomi, and he marries Ruth. And so just at the beginning, how Ruth was loyal to Naomi's family, so now Boaz is loyal to Naomi's family as well. The story concludes with a reversal of all of the tragedies from chapter 1. So the death of the husband and the sons is reversed as Ruth is married again and gives birth to a new son, granting joy to Naomi. And this symmetry between the opening and the closing, it's even more remarkable. So remember, the opening tragedy was followed by a great act of loyalty on the part of Ruth. And that is now matched by Boaz's act of loyalty that leads to the family's final restoration. And this symmetry, it highlights the design of the internal chapters as well. So each of the chapters begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan for their future, and that's followed by a providential meeting between Ruth and Boaz, and each chapter concludes with Naomi and Ruth rejoicing at what's taken place. This story is beautifully designed, and that design actually connects with a really interesting feature of the story, and that's how little God is mentioned. Right, the characters talk about God a few times, but the narrator actually never once mentions God doing anything directly in the story, and that's its brilliance. Because God's providence is at work behind every scene of this story, weaving together the circumstances and choices of all these characters. So Naomi, her tragedy leads her to think that God is punishing her, but actually the whole story is about God's mission to restore her and her family. And he's doing so through Ruth, through her boldness and loyalty, which brings healing to Naomi's life, but not without Boaz, who's a no-nonsense farmer who's full of generosity and loyalty. And so God uses his integrity combined with Ruth's boldness to save Naomi and her family. And so this story brilliantly explores the interplay of God's purposes and will with human decision and will. God weaves together the faithful obedience of his people to bring about his redemptive purposes in the world. And that leads to the real end of the story. The book of Ruth concludes with a genealogy, showing how Boaz and Ruth's son, Obed, was the grandfather of King David, from whom came the lineage of the Messiah. And so all of a sudden, these seemingly mundane, ordinary events in this story are woven into God's grand story of redemption for the whole world. And so the book of Ruth invites us to consider how God might be at work in the very ordinary, mundane details of our lives as well. And that's what the book of Ruth is all about.
Okay, guys, so there you have it, the book of Ruth in its summary from the Bible channel. Thank you all so much for coming into the live today. Thank you all so much for listening. For those of you who were here and those of you who will be listening afterwards, I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. And if you are new here and you have not yet subscribed to the channel, now is a great time to do so. Every single day, we read a chapter or two of the Bible, and we will continue doing so until we are finished reading the Bible for ourselves. So I want to say thanks again to everybody for coming. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope that from today's reading, you all learned something. Thanks again, my friends. That's going to be it from me for today. Until next time, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters.